In the previous video, I talked about how important the short description copy is for your Rightmove listing because it's the headline for the listing. And I covered the common mistakes that many agents make when writing that initial short description paragraph for their listing copy. So if you watch that video, you'll know how to avoid making those all too common mistakes, and I'll put the link to that video down below. So if you've watched that and you understand how to avoid making those mistakes, what do you do with those 250 characters that you've got on Rightmove that make up the short description instead? In a nutshell, when reading the listing copy headline online, the reader needs to visualize how moving will have a positive impact on their life. I think it's very easy for estate agents and letting agents to forget that moving house is an expensive and a stressful experience. People don't move house on a whim. It would be fair to say that they usually have to have a very strong reason for wanting to put themselves through all the stress and the hassle and the expense. So if we keep that in mind, we need to write the listing headline so it taps into the real reason which lies behind the move. And people generally make decisions based on emotion and then justify those decisions with fact and logic. And the sad thing is, if you had a look through Rightmove, you'd see that 99% of all property listing short descriptions and the full description when you click through contain very little other than facts, facts, facts. Now, I mentioned on the earlier video that Rightmove are actually giving some pretty bad advice, to be quite honest. They tell you to list the key features in the short description and they tell you to put them in capitals. That's terrible advice because, as I said earlier, people make decisions based on emotion, not facts or features. It's one of the reasons why you'll never hear me use the term property description. To be most effective, the listing copy needs to be so much more than just a description of the property, its key features, its the room sizes, how many radiators it's got, that sort of thing. And I recently saw a property where the agents had listed gas central heating and double glazing in the short description. Now, it's a cheap shot. It's easy for me to criticise, but seriously, in 2024, are double glazing and gas central heating selling points? To me, that would raise alarm bells if there's nothing more interesting about that property that you could write about. Now, there are only a very small number of deep-rooted emotional triggers or factors that will influence a decision. I'm not just talking about moving house here. This applies to everything. And these emotional triggers and factors are burned into our brains going back to when we were still hanging around in caves. So the starting point for writing a great listing headline is to think about how the property will improve one of the following aspects of the buyer or tenant's lives. It could be mental. So does the property have calming sea views? Is it in the idyllic countryside or close to a pleasant park? I'm thinking physically, does it have an open plan kitchen and family room dining area that's ideal for entertaining? Is it an apartment block that has an on-site gym or cinema room? People are motivated by financial considerations. Is it a cracking little investment? Does it have a heat pump or solar panels or something that's going to save them a fortune in bills. You can also think in terms of social triggers. Will their friends be very jealous? Is it one of the most sought after places to live? And then emotionally or spiritually, is it going to shave an hour off their daily commute, so make them much more calm, reduce their stress, and make them at peace? And finally, what about security? Will it protect them physically? Is it a big gated property, or security in terms of is it likely to be a property that maintains its value or grows in value? So those factors there are ultimately what lies behind most emotional decisions for buying stuff, doing stuff, essentially. And they're all about moving towards pleasure, which is a powerful motivator. So tapping into any one of those will make an effective short description headline. But the way the human brain is wired, showing how you can move away from pain is actually even more likely to be motivating. So you could potentially explore how the property will allow the buyer or tenant to reduce risk or worry or stress or losses, mistakes, embarrassment, drudgery, going back to the commute, or some other undesirable condition. Often you just need to look at a positive and flip it on its head to find out a negative. So looking at those two lists of pleasure you can gain or pain you can reduce, the key thing is to only pick one of those. Whether it's a positive or a negative, you need to be single-minded about making that the sole focus of your short description headline, which again goes against the whole throw it against the wall and see what sticks approach that Rightmove suggests of listing all of the features. So once you've decided on the one emotional trigger you're going to focus on, a good way to get the ball rolling with your headline is to ask a question that forces the reader to picture themselves in the situation. And it's powerful because the human brain is conditioned. Whenever it's asked a question, the human brain just automatically wants to answer it. So if you ask a question, the reader will struggle not to think about it or mentally answer it or visualize it. So looking at some of the emotional triggers that I just covered earlier, here's a few examples of how you could write the first sentence headline. Imagine your 3-minute weekend stroll down to your favourite cafe. Or your friends will be so jealous when they hear where you've moved. Would you like an extra half an hour in bed every day? Or sick and tired of creeping in late so you don't wake your parents? And finally, is your tiny flat bursting at the seams? So having got their attention, you now need to give them a compelling reason to click through. And you do that by relating the most appropriate property feature to the question posed. And when I say property feature, in a couple of those that I mentioned, it was actually the area that provided the benefit, not necessarily the physical bricks and mortar. And that's fine. So you talk about the buzzing high street full of independent shops and cafes, or the fabulous sought after riverside apartment development where everybody wants to live, or as I mentioned, how close the property is to a major employer, the business park, the council offices, or the hospital. Now with the last two examples about are you tired of creeping in and is your tiny flat bursting at the seams? You're tapping into the powerful pull of removing a negative. But, you know, you could take the view of putting a positive spin on those, because ultimately they're about getting more independence and getting more space. And I think going back to, you know, what I think where Rightmove get it wrong by saying list a whole load of key features. You've only got 250 characters in that short description, so you've got to be single-minded. You need to focus on one improvement to their lives, or removing one negative. And you've only got a couple of sentences. The headline sentence to grab the attention, and then another 1 or 2 sentences to back up the headline, question or statement. Listing multiple unrelated features is just like throwing mud at a wall to see what sticks. It's far more powerful to focus on the one biggest benefit the buyer will get, or the tenant will get, from buying or renting the property. Get that right, and it will then encourage the ideal buyer or tenant to click through to find out more, to find out how the property will actually make a difference to their lives. Writing the full description to follow on from the headline and persuade the potential buyer or tenant to get in touch and arrange a viewing obviously is a whole different subject, and is the subject for another video which I am going to record. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's been inspiring and has got you thinking about how you write your current property listings and how you might want to improve them to get more attention from your ideal buyers and tenants, and subsequently get more inquiries and improve the quality of those inquiries. If you like the video, be sure to hit like, or you can also hit subscribe. You can do both, so that you don't miss out on any future videos.